Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NCUST Review, What Great Schools Do. This podcast is designed to inform educators, policymakers, and school communities about the research-based practices, policies, and procedures that make great urban schools, well, simply put, great. I'm your host, Dr. Deborah McLaren, Executive Coach for NCUST. Today, our guest is Dr. Angela Bass. Welcome, Dr. Bass.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
So, can you tell us, first and foremost, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and your role in education? And I know that you have an extensive role in education, so can you tell us about your background, please?
I do have an extensive role. I have to acknowledge that I've been in education for 42 years. I grew up in a military background, one of 7 children, and I think my calling came early because I had to take care of my younger brothers and sisters. I had started out in San Francisco State University and got my education in liberal studies. And then I became a teacher in San Diego Unified School District, where I served in many capacities for 30 years, from a teacher to an area superintendent. I had some unique experiences in my leadership where I was able to work in Los Angeles for the mayor of Los Angeles. At that time, it was Antonio Villaraigosa, and he and the mayor's office and LA Unified School District were working to put together a hybrid model. We served the lowest 22 performing schools in the district, and actually they were the lowest in the state. And our job was to put different kinds of services their way rather than the traditional school system, to figure out what we needed to do to improve, accelerate achievement for these students. We knew they were brilliant, and we had to find out how we needed to go about doing that, and then create proof points for people for all over the city, for their parents, for other teachers, for leaders, that they were really brilliant and we could do this work. And it was some of the hardest work, but most exciting. It was the most rewarding work that I have spent. In my latter years, I have been doing leadership development with new leaders. And currently I'm assistant superintendent at the County Office of Education in San Diego, where I lead a division entitled Learning and Leadership Services. So I have the pleasure of making sure that our services that go out to 42 school districts in our county receive adequate services for students, for teachers, for administrators, and for our families.
Oh my goodness! So that's quite a journey, and I thought I had retired, and I thought you were headed in that direction, but this doesn't sound like retirement at all.
When I was called, because I think my work has always been a calling. When I was called to come to the county, I was, quote unquote, semi-retired consulting. But I think that our children, they deserve so much more. And if I can pour into other leaders and other educators so that they can pour into our students, that's what I'm here to do. So my work is not finished. I don't know how much longer I'm going to do, but I truly get up every day and I love what I do. I love the people that I work with, and we've got to create better systems and structures for our children and for our schools to be able to serve our children.
Well, I just appreciate the fact that you are pouring into those up-and-coming leaders, because I think that is so important that they understand, first and foremost, what we have learned as leaders that really makes the difference for our kids. And one of the things that you said in talking about your journey is you talked about something that is becoming a theme across this podcast, and that is the importance of believing. You believed in that community that you worked in. You believed in the children. You believed they had brilliance. And belief isn't just an easy thing to do. It's something that you have to set your mind and say, no, they really can do this. I really believe they can, and not be surprised by the fact that when they do it, oh my goodness, I didn't think they could do it. But believing that they can and saying, I knew you could do it. Kind of reminds me of that childhood book, that the little engine that could. Well, I got another version of it that said, I knew you could.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
There,
Yeah, so go ahead.
no, I was going to say there was a lot of, do you believe in you? Because I believe in you. And we had to spread that mantra across the system. Do you believe in you? Because once they began to believe in themselves, and we shared that we did, it changed the trajectory for so many children. And I think of the sense of belonging. One of the things you hear a lot today is this sense of belonging. And I think it is a holy grail to making sure that children feel like they belong, families feel like they belong, teachers, administrators, and not leave children in the space where they feel othered. Deborah, when you feel othered, that means you're left out of the story, whether it's your school or your classroom. But we've got to create a sense of belonging. And I agree with you. The mindset is first and foremost for every human being. Do you have the mindset that all people are brilliant, that we are very human-centered? And I think sometimes we get so caught up into the curricula that we forget about the mindset and relationships.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. We have what Carol Dweck has done research on. We have a fixed mindset. It's like, oh, this group of people, they're never going to be able to do this, or this group of students, oh no, they can't do that. They have these issues and that sort of thing. I know, I'm thinking as you're talking about the importance of belonging, the importance of really mattering. I had the opportunity to review some books that had been some children's books that were being looked at for being more inclusive and making sure that the books had representations of different types of families and different types of people. And one of the books that I was not in favor of, and I put that on my review, it was something about this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter. And so the person who was in charge of collecting the book review, she said, why didn't you care for this book? I said, because I don't believe that these things don't matter. They do matter. We all matter. So it's sending the wrong message in the wrong way. We do matter. I matter. You matter. What I believe matters. What somebody else believes matters. We don't have to necessarily agree with it, but we all matter. So I had a trouble with this story that was about nothing matters. Well, yeah, I don't think so. I think it does. So I'm going to get to the next question here. What has your experience been with NCUST?
It has been a beautiful experience. In 2014, I think, is when it first came to my attention in San Diego. And I attended a conference. I don't know if it was the first NCUST conference, but it was one of the first. And what was so beautiful about it, Deborah, is that Dr. Johnson brought people together to tell them exactly what we were talking about, that our children matter, that our children are brilliant, and that we need to get our mindset correct, because he brought proof. He brought together leaders based on specific criteria that showed all children achieving at high levels could do this easily. And he brought those people who were doing it to the table, to the conference, to tell us how to do that. And from that moment, I was a principal at that time. Nope, I was an area superintendent at that time. And it was just like, it was almost like people had only heard it for the very first time. And that was 2014. And, I have been working a long time before that, trying to do that work. But what Dr. Johnson did was bring it to the table for everybody to see and hear.
I think that's really important, because I know as I continue to visit schools, one of the things that I notice overall, that the schools that are not having great results, first and foremost, it starts by the things that I hear many of the teachers say. Oh, sweetie, you're not ready for that. Oh, you can't do that yet. Or things that make them feel like they're not able to do certain things. And when you have that mindset that they can't do this and they can't do that, then you automatically send this message. I'll never forget, I have had another career before I started in this, and I'll never forget, was going to an audition, and my voice teacher said to me, "Oh, I don't think you're ready." And I went to that audition, and I didn't do very well. I went to another audition, and my voice coach said, "Now go knock 'em dead. You're really cooking." And I won. And I thought about that over the years, was that they sent this message that, oh, you can do this. When they said I could do it, then I believed I could do it. When they said I couldn't do it, then I didn't believe I could do it. So I think you tap onto something really important about how we believe and what we do in this work.
But I also discovered that there were consistencies in leadership. These leaders were socially conscious leaders. They listened well. They studied. But they were also risk takers. They were very relational. There were certain attributes that these leaders held, and it was consistent across the board. They cared. Everyone knew that they cared, but they had extremely high expectations because they knew our children could succeed. And some of the sessions, that was what people needed to hear, because they weren't risk-taking. They were playing it safe. And playing it safe with regards to all of our children and their needs is not going to get our children educated well. So there were those socially conscious leaders. They understood that the diversity, they respected the diversity, they took time to learn about the different cultures, but they held all children with high expectations, and they wanted teachers to hold all children with high expectations.
Well, I know that holding high expectations, for some, they have trouble with that because they want the easy road. They want to be able to sit back and sort of just go through the motions. And so it's difficult sometimes getting everyone on board with your high expectations as a leader, because they want you to just kind of leave them alone sometimes and coast. But one of the things I continue to remind those that I work with is, well, let's think about this. Why are we here? We have a job. We have an education. Our students don't. So we're here for them. We're not here for ourselves. So that means that we have to help them get what we have. How are we going to do that?
I was thinking about your comment, because, we have a lot of people using this word called equity these days. And I wonder if they're really able to put it in play. Like, equity is giving children what they need when they need it. And I think equity is giving teachers what they need when they need it.
Uh-huh.
I think we don't have teachers who have been skilled enough to meet all the needs. So I think our responsibility as leaders is to teach. So even though we are in a leadership position, we should always be knowing where our teachers are so we can teach them, and then they can better teach and serve their students. They also say equity is love in action. Do you love our children enough to give them what they need? And I think that's a really important question that every educator should ask. Do we love? Because as a parent and as a grandparent, I'd go to the ends of the earth to give my children and my grandchild what they need. But I have to ask teachers, do you really love them? And I'm saying agape love, but I think love is love. Do I care enough about you? Do I know enough about you to meet and serve your needs?
I so resonate with what you're saying. I just, on a previous podcast interview, I was talking about the word excellence, and how excellence I came to define as the excellent way being about love. And once I understood that excellence stood for, or love was excellence, then I also had to clearly define what is love.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, okay, what is love? Love is patient, it's kind, it's humble, it doesn't want its own way, it's not easily angered, it doesn't fail, and sometimes love must be tough.
Absolutely. All of that. That's beautiful.
So that's what drove me, was understanding what love looked like and what it sounded like, what I wanted for myself, what I wanted for my grandchildren, what I wanted for my children. So you've talked about equity, you've talked about the excellence and mindset and all of that. Now, tell us about a positive change, perhaps, that you have made in your work as an educational leader.
Sure. I'd love to go back to two instances at two different schools as principals. One of the things I learned really quickly, context matters.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't give the same formula or serve people in the same way because the context in which they live or their lived experiences are different. I was at one school and at a school that it was in a bedroom community, predominantly white or Caucasian. And then half of the students came from Southeast San Diego. When I got there, the school was about in the 50% under that times assessment. And it was just like, why are they performing so low? So Caucasian children were at the 80th percentile, Hispanic, African American, Asian children were at the 20th.
Oh my goodness.
Teachers have been teaching for 20 plus years. They saw themselves as professionals, but it wasn't panning out. So I talked about the systems and structures that need to be in place. Was I had to figure out a plan to support them. And what I found was that Hispanic children were sent to a lab between 8 and 11. African American children were sent to a computer lab. And guess who was left in the classroom to teach? So taking a look at that, created systems where all children were in class in the morning hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, Deborah, that in 2 years, we went from being in the 50th percentile overall to being in the top 5% in the state. It wasn't that these teachers knew how to teach, but they had the mindset different, that there had to be something different for African American children and Asian children and Hispanic children. What they saw when children were in class gave them such pride. I did not have to diminish teachers and call them out, gave them the data. But once they began putting kids together in classrooms, their brilliance rose. Caucasian children, 90%. Asian children, 89%, and Hispanic and African American children, 87% in this school.
Wow.
And then celebrating that with all communities, bringing buses so that our families from the Southeast community could join in, and report cards, special social events. It changed the dynamic of a school, and it changed the mindset of the school too. And they saw teachers had pride because they saw all their children succeeding.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot. I will tell you, in Canto Elementary School, 1,200 students. When I walked my classroom of 68 teachers, honestly, only 8 teachers could teach a full day with rigor and robust energy and commitment. The other teachers lacked a lot of skills. And so, again, different contexts, bringing to them, number one, resources, training, visiting other schools, and only started with 18 teachers first, because you can't lift everyone at the same time. These teachers were magnificent. They had the desire, they had the talent, but they needed to be, they needed the training, they needed the experiences, they needed to see what excellent teaching looked like. And so I give that to you because I think that we make the mistake of thinking what we did at this school can be just plopped onto that school, and it just can't. We have to be archaeologists, really. We have to excavate the stories in these schools and figure out how to work with our teachers and with our communities to serve them better.
Well, I know that when you provide support to the teachers, first and foremost, nobody gets into teaching for the money, all right? Yep. And if they do, then perhaps they need to see a therapist. But
got to be that love.
But they don't get into that. They get into it because they have a desire to really do something in education to make a difference. And so when they have that level of support that you're talking about, when they know the community that they're working in and they have the willingness to learn and develop the skill set, then wonderful magic happens. And I know I experienced that in my career too. And the cool thing about it is success breeds success. So
Absolutely.
when they're successful, they want that feeling even more. And pretty soon they bring anybody new on board. But at this school, these are the things we do, and this is the pride we have because of the work that we do, making a difference for students. So if you could go back in time and meet at any historical figure, who would it be and why?
One of my favorite sheroes. Well, I have two, but one that is, a public shero is Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman had a vision. Harriet Tubman was liberated in her mind, but she wasn't yet free. And her job was to support and work with people to get them to come north. She had courageous leadership. She was so socially conscious. It wasn't just to get her family to the north, it was to convince other people. She had a quote that said, "If I could have convinced more slaves that they were slaves, I would have freed more."
Oh, wow.
And her mission was so compelling, and she was persistent and resilient and went to all these steps. And we think only 300 to 500 people were brought to freedom under her reign. That's significant to travel to Canada, to get north was such a feat. And so my admiration was for her. She knew what she needed to do. She knew what she was called to do. And she did it every day, and she didn't apologize for doing it. So she's certainly a shero. I think my second one is my great-grandmother, Joanna Payne Green. She had a fourth grade education. She took care of other people's children for 18 years until the Blankensteins grew up. And then she went to work in a sanatorium, and the people in the sanatorium were healing from something. She was the head cook, and it was in 1928.
Oh, my goodness.
A town in Mississippi where people were not getting fed. It didn't matter if you were white or if you were black. And my great-grandmother, Joanna, that's who I named my daughter for, she took all the leftover food in the kitchen after everyone in the sanatorium had eaten, and she gave it to the man. He came after the hours, and they had a list of all the people who had no food. And for 10 years, Joanna fed a community. So I love her because she understood service. It wasn't about her.
Yeah.
They didn't have money. They didn't have much. But she knew community. And I aspire to be like her in my own way. But, she was brilliant. She knew how to serve. She cared for people. And I had a 94-year-old woman come to me after my father died and said, I wanted to meet Joe's granddaughter, and said, because of your grandmother, we have doctors, we have lawyers, and we have just good people. She was 4 years old at the time of my great-grandmother's service to her family. So that's what we should be about. We should be about serving people.
Well, what it really calls to my mind is the importance of legacy. And
Yeah.
when we invest in others, when we do things for others, I've often said I'm not a huge fan of the term self-esteem, that we should have called it other esteem. And part of that is because when we get so wrapped up in self, we lose our ability to see the importance of others. And so the fact that your great-grandmother saw the importance of her work making a difference for others, that's extraordinary, and that's a great legacy. And it ties in with the work that we're doing here at NCUST is trying to give back to create that legacy, but also to pass on what we know really makes a difference in providing a quality education for all students. So thank you for everything you've shared today, and I will have to go back and do a little bit more research on Harriet Tubman.
Oh, amazing woman. Amazing. I think we have Harriet Tubmans in our work, Deborah. We don't always give as much credit. I mean, I think of you as a a principal of a high-performing school, and I know what it took for you to maintain, number one, your dignity and love your teachers and your children enough to get your students to high places. We are changing generations.
Yes.
And it may be one at a time, 2 at a time, 10 at a time. We have a goal in the county, and it's reducing poverty from 51% to 35%. And we do that by providing programs, by working with schools, by developing systems and supports that give our children opportunities to show their brilliance. If I could share one quick story, and you may cut it out, I don't know, but I was in a panel where we invited 5 children to participate and tell us what they thought about schools. They were African-American children, and we had a lot of questions for them, and they were answering our questions, and we were hearing things like, why do teachers always start the new year by giving us stuff that we learned last year? Why do teachers always give us things like paper, dittos? We want to write. We don't just want to do dittos. And so we were listening to them. And then this little boy asked us a question. And he said, what is it about me that you can't teach? And my body could have been on the ground, because he asked a profound question, because he keeps wondering, what is it about me that you can't teach? So you have to give us old stuff and reiterate, never believe in the brilliance. And that's guided me for the last 10 years. And I think that's probably why I came back and continue to work in education, because I've got to convince more people that our children are much more than what we're giving them.
Yeah. I know that that's one of the things that I often encourage other leaders to do is ask the children. They'll tell you.
Yep.
They will tell you many times. Well, thank you, Dr. Bass, for being a guest here on the NCUST Review. The National Center for Urban Schools Transformation was founded in 2005 to help districts and their partners transform schools into places where all students achieve academic proficiency, evidence of a love of learning, and graduate well prepared to succeed in post-secondary education, the workplace, and their communities. We will broadcast a new episode of this podcast at the beginning of each month. You can subscribe to the NCUST Review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and iHeartRadio. Once again, we want to thank you for listening to this episode of the NCUST Review. Until next time, I'm your host, Dr. Deborah McLaren, for the NCUST Review, What Great Schools Do.